Year's 2016. I took a trip to Wales with my girlfriend, where my family lived and I was originally from. I lived up in Newcastle at the time with my girlfriend, so I was going to spend the New Year celebrating with my brother and seeing the family. When we arrived, it was great to see everyone, and it was nice to meet my brother's fiancée. I'd been in Newcastle for a while and never had the chance of meeting her, albeit they'd gotten engaged pretty quick after having only been together but a year. But we planned for New Year's Eve, as a foursome, to go to a secluded spot on the beach and let off some fireworks, bringing in the new year with some drinks, sea, and sand. We'd went to get our supplies the day before, and I'd toured my girlfriend around my old stomping grounds, showing her the places I used to hang out when I lived down there. When New Year's Eve came, and after spending the afternoon with the family, my girlfriend and I, along with my brother and his fiancée, readied our stuff and set out heading for the beach to get ready to bring in the new year. Where we were going, you couldn't drive the car directly to it, so we got dropped off, as we were all obviously drinking, to the main beachfront, then planned to walk the rest of the way, as the part we were heading to was on the other side of some hilltops where it was more secluded. On the walk, it was beautiful to see the moonlight glistening off the sea and hearing the waves washing. We were already having fun, even though we hadn't reached our destination yet. As we walked and talked, we were discussing what our New Year's resolutions were going to be, as, tradition to start the new year, promising one thing, then fading off after a month or so. I'm sure a lot of us do it. As we were walking our route, we could see a figure heading towards us. We couldn't clearly see who it was, but they were alone. As soon as they noticed us, they stopped, dead in their tracks, staring in our direction. This caused us all to slow down. As we walked closer, we found this strange. As we approached, the figure just stood there, with their head down, facing the ground. We couldn't see their face, as they were wearing some kind of hooded cloak. We literally walked past them, two of us either side of the figure. My brother spoke, asking if they were okay and if they needed any help. There was no reply. The figure just slowly raised their head to the side, staring at my brother for a second before putting their head back down and facing the ground. All we could hear was their slow, deep breathing. After asking again, still no reply. Taking that as a no, they didn't need anything, we all slowly walked past, finding the whole encounter strange. As we walked into the distance, we turned around and noticed the figure was now facing our direction, watching our every move as we walked off. This really freaked the girls out. And I mean, in all honesty, I found it strange too, thinking where they were coming from and what they were doing out here all alone. But with them far back in the distance, we tried to just forget about it. After a half an hour walk, we were a few drinks in by now and had not been followed by that person. We had reached our spot, and in good time with it only being 11 p.m. At the time, we had another hour to kill before our New Year's countdown could begin. We drank and sang into the night. It was around 11:45, I remember, when I heard something in the distance. The faint sound of shouting. I told the others to be quiet for a second, as to get a better listen as to what it was. But in the moment, they weren't paying attention, and my brother said it was probably another group of people doing the same thing we were doing, but over on the other side of the hill, separating the beach coves. And he was probably right, but I needed to pee anyway, and with curiosity getting the better of me, I decided I'd go check it out. Telling the others I was going for a pee and I'd be back quickly, I took off up the slope while they continued to drink and get the fireworks ready. Intrigued to see what the faint sounds were, it didn't take me long to see as I reached the hilltop, a faint glow in the near distance down the bottom. It was a fire, and as I observed, I could clearly see a group of figures standing around that fire, and they seemed to be chanting. In front of the figures chanting, there was someone separate facing them that seemed to be holding something in his hand. I tried to make out what it was. I tried to focus, but as I did, my heart nearly burst through my chest. Crashing from the sky above me was fireworks. My brother had set some off early, scaring the living shit out of me. Looking down at them, setting them off, I was pissed. I turned to look back at the group I had spotted, but now there was only darkness. The fire had been put out, and all I could see was the faint movement of dark figures shuffling around down below. Looking at the time, I noticed it was nearing midnight. Not wanting to miss the countdown, I headed back down, but in all honesty, I was confused as to why the fireworks going off would have made them put their fire out. What were they doing? I kept thinking. I reached the others and gave my brother some what-fors about setting the fireworks off, but he seemed to find it hilarious that it scared me. Of course he did. Asking me what I was looking at up there, I told my girlfriend. I really didn't know, just a group of people around a fire doing God knows what. It was now 5 to midnight, and with all the fireworks we had, we began to set off some more. They lit up the sky beautifully, and the view over the sea was great. But the more and more fireworks lit up the sky, and my curiosity still getting the better of me. It wasn't long before I looked back up to that hilltop and saw a sight that made me stone cold sober. As the fireworks lit up the sky, across the hilltop stood, looking down at us, 10 hooded figures. Being the only one that noticed, my heart began to race as I signaled to the others. They just about saw what I was pointing at before darkness covered the hillside again. We all stood there in the dark, not knowing who the hell they were. But as another firework exploded above us, fear consumed us all. Lighting up the sky, we could now clearly see the figures descending the slope and heading straight at us. They were wearing the same kind of hooded cloak that the person we had passed earlier was wearing. This was anything but friendly. Whatever they were doing on the other side of that hill, we had disturbed them, and they clearly did not want anyone seeing. I grabbed my girlfriend's hand, shouting for my brother and his fiancée to run. The closer the figures got, the worse the threat I saw, as numerous figures clearly had knives in their hands. Sprinting across the sand was difficult, but we ran as fast as we could away from them, all the while them chasing us. The adrenaline rushed through me, my girlfriend sobbing in tears as we all ran scared for our safety. We had no car waiting for us. We had no choice but to lose them. But as we ran, and the further we got, and the closer we got to the main beach area, the figures began to fade back into the distance, as if they didn't want to be seen by others. And luckily for us, our saving grace was a large group of people on the main beach celebrating the new year. As we were back in civilization, we looked back behind us, and to our luck, no one followed us any further. My brother asking what the fuck that was, I explained to him what I'd seen up there, and with them chanting around the fire and putting it out when they heard our fireworks close by, we assumed we must have stumbled upon some cult activity or something ritualistic that night, which is not uncommon to have stuff like this go on in this country. But not wanting anyone to see what they were doing, they obviously scared us off, and yeah, it worked. I just wonder what would have happened had they caught us though. I dread to think about what they might have done. That was one unexpected and terrifying way to bring in the new year, and I hope not to find myself or my family in that position ever again. I don't know who those people were, but I do know they had bad intentions. This event happened to me on New Year's Eve a few years back, in my hometown of Portland, Oregon. For some backstory, I'm a female and was 25 at the time this happened. I was working as a supervisor at a local bar that I'd been working at for the past year. Christmas and New Year's were always busy times of the year, but New Year's wasn't a holiday I was really bothered about. I'd much rather have Christmas off than New Year's. So I was down to work the New Year's Eve shift and bring in the new year with a busy long night. As you probably know, it's one of the most hectic nights of the year, especially in a bar environment. We were nothing fancy, so tickets weren't needed to get in, and the bar would consist of mostly regulars anyway. We were typically short-staffed that night, and my manager was off celebrating the holidays, so I had to make do with the staff we had and get stuck in. Working in that type of place, you see all kinds of drunks. You get your happy drunks, sad drunks, aggressive drunks, and your blackout drunks. All can be annoying in their own way, but it's the aggressive and blackout drunks you want to watch out for and really don't want to have to deal with. It was past midnight and the celebrations for New Year's were finally dying down. It'd been a long and busy shift and I was tired and just ready for bed, but I knew we didn't really close until the last of the regulars had left. Plus, we had a lot of cleaning to do before I could even think of getting into bed. It was nearing 3 a.m. when the door to the bar opened. I looked over and saw a hooded figure walk in. Great, I thought, as we weren't letting anyone else in at this time. The person went straight to the bar and sat down on a stool with their head down. I went over to tell him that we were no longer letting people in and he would have to leave. But as they sat down, I could see them swaying sideways, back and forth, clearly very drunk. I went behind the bar in front of them and politely said, "Excuse me, I'm sorry, but we're closing up shortly and we're not letting anyone else in, I'm afraid, so you'll have to leave." This seemed to fall on deaf ears, as the person didn't budge or look up, acknowledging I was even there. "Excuse me, did you hear me?" I questioned again, but still no response. Great, I thought. Another blackout had walked in. I was about to call my colleague over and have him remove this person when their hand suddenly banged down on the bar. The person's head began to lift up. The person looked slowly at me as they removed their hood, and now I could see it was a gaunt and creepy-looking middle-aged man whose eyes were wide and piercing as they looked at me. The way he stared blankly at me really creeped me out. Then after a good 30 seconds or so, he spoke.
"Give me one drink, and I'll be on my way. I will leave,"
he said. I told him the same thing as before, but as I was saying it, he cut me up.
"Please, just one drink, and I'll be on my way,"
he said again, emotionless. The way he stared at me really got under my skin. At this point, I didn't want any hassle or drama. In all honesty, I just wanted the man to be gone. So I agreed and asked him what he wanted, poured him his beer, and left to let him drink it. I went straight to my colleague Rob and notified him that after that beer, the man had to leave. The bar was pretty much empty now anyway. As I tidied, I noticed the man staring blankly at the wall as if he had zoned out. He had finished his beer and, unlike what he said, he had not left and was still sitting there. I looked at Rob, who was making his way over to the man. I saw Rob speaking to him, and the man just stared into space as if Rob wasn't there. As Rob was about to tell the man again, he suddenly got up, turned around, and walked out. He was clearly drunk, but there was something off about the guy. I dealt with many drunks working in bars before, but that guy really creeped me out. But he'd finally left and the three of us could finally clean up and get ready to go home. As we closed up, I let Rob leave early as he cycled. Claire, my other colleague, was getting picked up by her boyfriend, so as we locked up, she called him to come and get her. I didn't drive myself, so I was ordering myself an Uber. We were standing outside when I checked my phone and noticed my Uber had typically stopped. In fact, it'd gone from 5 to 10 minutes. I guess it had pinged another driver. Claire offered to give me a ride home from her boyfriend. As grateful as I was, I declined it as she lived in the opposite direction and I didn't want to put them out of their way. I told her my Uber would be here in no time and not for her to worry. So as she took off, I checked my phone to see the Uber was still 9 minutes away. Not accepting Claire's offer was a decision I was about to regret. The street was cold and empty. I was alone and tired when out of the corner of my eye, I saw something. As I turned, I was shocked to see the figure of the creepy hooded man standing next to me. I jumped back. He must have come out from the alleyway next to the bar. He was staring straight at me without saying a word. The uncontrollable feeling of dread took over my body. I didn't quite know what to say as he stared straight back at me with those blank, dark eyes. When he suddenly spoke,
"Got a cigarette?"
My heart racing, I stuttered, "Sorry, no," as I didn't smoke. The man continued to just stare at me for about a minute, but it seemed like forever. The tone of his voice then changed as he asked me,
"Why are you lying to me? I just want a cigarette."
I was taken back and frankly scared shitless, being on my own. I wasn't lying, I told him. I genuinely didn't smoke. He stood staring at me again for a good minute. I felt froze to the spot. The man then turned and walked off back down the street. I could feel the sweat of my palms clenching my phone as my heart raced. I looked at my phone, quietly pleading to myself for the Uber to just get here, but again it said 5 minutes. I wasn't willing to wait alone where I was, in fear of the man coming back, so I began to walk down the street in the opposite direction, hoping to run into my Uber as that's the way it was coming from. As I walked, I checked my phone again, looking behind me every few seconds. 3 minutes. It was almost here. The man was nowhere in sight. I stopped on the corner down the street from the bar, waiting to see my Uber, when the hairs on my neck stood on end. From behind me, the haunting sound of a creepy whistle broke out. It was the man again. Walking back down in my direction, he slowly walked, whistling as he stared straight at me, not even blinking. At this point, I was fearing for the worst. Fearing what this creep wanted from me. Looking at my phone, my Uber was on the street less than a minute away. I could see headlights in the distance. It had to be the Uber. I began walking towards it, but as I did, fear consumed me. All I could hear behind me was the sound of running footsteps. As I turned to see the man, at full pelt, sprinting after me, I screamed and ran as fast as my now jelly legs would take me towards the Uber. I literally ran out in front of it, waving my arms. It pulled to a stop as I banged on the door to get in. The driver let me in. Obviously, having seen the man behind me, he got out of his car, but the creep had taken off back down the street in the opposite direction. I had never been so scared in my life. I literally thought that was going to be it for me. The Uber dropped me off at home and I bolted all of my doors and windows. I informed the police about what had happened, but the man was never found. I had a week off from work after that in fear of seeing the man, but I did continue to work at the bar after that and never saw that creep again. Drunk or not, that man was crazy. And I sincerely hope no one has to experience what I did. That was the worst New Year's I have ever had, and his face still gives me the chills to this day. Thank you for listening to this true haunting New Year's encounter. If you like this video and our World of Horror motives, please like, comment, and share. It really helps the video and the whole channel out. We really appreciate it, everyone. We just want to say thank you for being here in our first year of Horror Motives and coming along for the chilling ride. We can't wait to bring you more terrifying content in 2023. So we just want to wish you sincerely a haunting new year. And remember, fear lies within.